The lonely alien girl. Zyra sat in the corner of a dark alley, her small body pressed against the cold metal wall. The neon lights of the alien city flickered above her, casting strange shadows across the wet ground. Her three-fingered hands hugged her knees tightly. The sharp ridges of her twisted leg ached from hours of sitting still, but she didn't move. Moving might make noise, and noise might bring them back. Voices still echoed in her mind. Cruel laughter. Mocking words. Look at her leg. She's broken. Useless. Weak. Not worth even looking at. Her glowing left eye dimmed with sadness. It wasn't just her leg. Her eye made her different too. While the right eye was normal, the left glowed with a soft silver light. Her people believed that light was a curse, something unnatural. They didn't know what it really was. But Zyra didn't know either. A low sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Not the light, scuttling steps of her own people. No, these were different. Her heart raced. Someone was coming. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows. The footsteps stopped at the entrance to the alley. Slowly, she lifted her head. A tall figure stood there, blocking the light from the street. It was wearing dark armor and a helmet with a reflective visor. Zyra's chest tightened. Was it a soldier from the city? Or worse, was it one of them? The figure stepped forward. The metal boots made a soft crunch against the broken pavement. Zyra's breath caught in her throat. She saw the insignia on the shoulder plate. A red circle with a white star in the middle. A human. Her people told stories about humans. Strange, stubborn creatures from a distant world. Dangerous warriors who fought even when they had no chance to win. But Zyra also heard whispers that humans protected the weak. She didn't know what to believe. The human knelt down, bringing his face level with hers. The helmet slid open with a soft hiss. The man had short, dark hair, a rough beard, and tired eyes. But when he looked at her, his gaze was calm, kind. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you hurt?" Zyra didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice. Her glowing eye flickered as she stared at him. The man reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small silver packet. He opened it and held it out to her. The smell of warm, spiced food filled the air. Her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, but she still didn't move. "It's okay," the man said, shaking the packet gently. "I promise. It's safe." Hesitantly, Zyra reached out, snatched the packet, and retreated back to the wall. She tore it open and took a bite. The food was soft and sweet, unlike anything she had tasted before. She ate quickly, afraid it might disappear. The man didn't speak while she ate. He just watched the alley entrance, his eyes sharp now. Alert. When the food was gone, Zyra finally whispered, "Why?" The man turned back to her. "Why what?" "Why help me?" The man exhaled slowly. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And humans, we don't leave people behind." Zyra didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Suddenly, the man's eyes narrowed. He stood up, his body tense. "What's wrong?" Zyra asked, her voice shaking. He didn't answer right away. He tapped a device on his wrist. A faint blue light scanned the alley. After a moment, a soft beep sounded. "They're coming," the man said. Zyra's heart raced. "Who?" The man looked down at her. "The ones who want you. The ones who think your eye is a curse." He extended a hand. "Come on. We need to go." Zyra's mind spun with confusion. Who wanted her? Why did they care about her glowing eye? And how did this human know about it? But the footsteps were growing louder now. More than one set. Heavy and fast. The man's hand didn't waver. "Trust me," he said. Zyra squeezed her eyes shut, took a shaky breath, and grabbed his hand. He pulled her to her feet and lifted her easily when her twisted legs slowed her down. Zyra clung to his armor as he carried her out of the alley. The cold night air hit her face as they reached the street. Behind them, shadows moved, dark shapes in black armor, tall and fast, with glowing red visors. The pursuers. The man cursed under his breath and sprinted toward a narrow bridge. Zyra peeked over his shoulder. The black armored figures were gaining. One raised an arm, and a blue energy bolt shot toward them. The man turned sharply, barely dodging the blast. The bolt struck a streetlight, which exploded in a shower of sparks. "Hold on," the man shouted. Zyra gripped his neck tighter as he raced across the bridge. Another energy blast hit the ground behind them. The man didn't slow down, but Zyra heard something new through the sounds of their footsteps and the distant shouts. From the shadows of the city ahead, a deep metallic voice echoed, "Bring me the girl, alive." Zyra's glowing eye widened in fear. She didn't know who that voice belonged to, but the human carrying her did, and that was even scarier. The chase begins. The night air felt sharp against Zyra's skin as the human carried her across the bridge. The city behind them was no longer just a place of shadows and whispers. It was a hunting ground, and they were the prey. Zyra clung to the man's neck, her heart racing faster with every step. The black-armored pursuers weren't giving up. Their footsteps pounded against the metal bridge, and the sharp crack of energy weapons echoed through the night. Blue bolts streaked past, scorching the walls around them. "Who are they?" "Zyra guessed." The man didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the streets ahead as he ran. "They're called the Virex Syndicate," he said finally. "They're not here for you. They're here for your eye." Zyra's stomach twisted. Her eye. The thing everyone mocked. The thing that made her a freak. "Why?" she whispered. The man turned a corner and ducked into a narrow alley. He pressed his back against the wall, breathing hard. "Because your eye isn't a curse," he said. "It's a gift. A rare one. You can see things others can't." Zyra shook her head. "That's not true. My people said it's broken." "Your people were wrong," the man said firmly. "Your eye can detect energy patterns, things hidden from normal sight. And the Virex, they want to use you to find something powerful." A shiver ran down Zyra's spine. She didn't know what energy patterns were, but she knew fear when she felt it. "What do they want me to find?" The man peeked around the corner. His jaw tightened. "A weapon," he said softly. "A weapon that can destroy planets." Zyra's breath caught in her throat. Destroy planets. Her eye could help with something like that. A metallic voice shattered the silence. "Find them. The girl must not escape." Zyra tensed. That voice was the same as before, deep, cold, and emotionless. "Who is that?" she whispered. The man pulled her close and adjusted the rifle slung across his back. "His name is Kuravik," he said. "He runs the Virex Syndicate. And if he gets you, no world will be safe." Zyra squeezed her eyes shut, trying to process it all. She was just a broken girl from a city where no one cared. Now she was running from a monster who wanted to use her to destroy planets. It didn't make sense. The man tapped his wrist device. A small holographic map appeared in the air. Red dots moved toward their position from multiple directions. "They're surrounding us," he said. "We'll have to go underground." He looked down at her. "I'm Daniel, by the way. Captain Daniel Reeves, Earth Alliance Marines." "Zyra," she whispered. Daniel gave a small nod. "Okay, Zyra. Hold tight." He knelt down and pressed a hidden panel on the street. With a soft hiss, a metal hatch slid open, revealing a ladder leading into darkness. "Down we go," Daniel said. Zyra didn't like the idea of going underground. Darkness had always felt like a trap. But the sound of approaching footsteps made her choice clear. She clung to Daniel as he climbed down. The hatch slid shut above them, sealing them in pitch-black silence. Zyra whimpered softly, but then her left eye adjusted. The darkness shifted into faint shapes of glowing lines. Energy lines. She could see the outline of the tunnel walls, the faint hum of cables running along the ceiling, and even Daniel's faint body heat. Daniel activated a dim flashlight and pointed it down the tunnel. "We follow this to the old metro station," he said. "From there, we head into the wastelands." "Wastelands?" Syra asked. Daniel started walking, his boots splashing softly through shallow water. "An old battleground from the war. No one goes there now, but that's exactly why we need to." Syra nodded, though fear coiled in her chest. Every step echoed, like the tunnel itself was whispering their movements to the enemy. She didn't know if they were safe or just delaying the inevitable. After walking for nearly an hour, Daniel stopped abruptly. "What is it?" Syra asked. Daniel pointed ahead. "See that?" Syra squinted. Through her glowing eye, she saw faint energy patterns on the walls ahead. At first, they seemed random, but then she noticed something strange. The lines pulsed, softly, but with rhythm. "It's a trap," she realized. Daniel smiled faintly. "Good eye." Literally. He knelt down and placed a small device on the ground. It buzzed softly, then emitted a pulse of blue light. The energy lines ahead flickered, then vanished. "Motion sensors," Daniel explained. "Korevic likes to stay one step ahead." The ground trembled suddenly. A low, mechanical growl echoed through the tunnel. Syra's eyes went wide. What was that? Daniel pulled her behind an old support column and raised his rifle. Trouble. Metal clanks grew louder. From the far end of the tunnel, two hulking shapes emerged from the shadows. They were nearly twice Daniel's height, with thick armored plating and glowing red sensors where eyes should be. "Virex war drones," Daniel muttered. Syra's heart pounded in her chest. "What do we do?" Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. "We survive." The war drones detected the movement and charge. Daniel opened fire. Blue energy bolts struck the nearest drone, leaving scorch marks, but barely slowing it down. The second drone launched a missile. It struck the wall behind them, and the explosion hurled Daniel and Syra to the ground. The blast's force made Syra's ears ring. She looked up and saw the drones advancing through the smoke. Daniel groaned and tried to stand, but his leg was pinned under debris. The drones raised their cannons. Syra's glowing eye caught faint energy lines crisscrossing the ceiling. An old power conduit. Her heart raced. "Daniel, the ceiling. Shoot the ceiling." Daniel followed her gaze. Without hesitating, he aimed upward and fired. The bolt struck the conduit. Sparks flew. The weakened ceiling collapsed onto the drones, crushing them under tons of rubble. Silence returned. Daniel panted as he pushed the debris off his leg. "Smart thinking, kid." Syra helped him stand. "You said, 'My eye sees energy,'" she said. "That's how I saw the conduit." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. And we're going to need that skill if we want to stop Korevic." Syra stared down the dark tunnel ahead. For the first time, she didn't hate her glowing eye. But fear still lingered. Because somewhere above them, Korevic was still hunting. Escape to the Westlands. The underground tunnel stretched endlessly into darkness, but Syra's glowing eye guided the way. The energy lines painted a hidden map before her, showing cables, pipes, and faint heat signatures of creatures hiding in the walls. She walked beside Daniel, her small hand gripping his gloved fingers tightly. His breathing was heavy, his leg injured from the blast, but he kept moving. Syra didn't speak. Her mind was too full. The Virex Syndicate. Korevic. The glowing eye she had hated her whole life was the reason they were hunting her. A weapon that could destroy planets. That's what they wanted her to find. Daniel gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You're thinking hard," he said softly. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm just a broken girl with a bad leg." Daniel stopped and knelt beside her. His eyes, tired but kind, met hers. "You're not broken, Syra," he said. You're gifted. That eye of yours, it can sense energy fields others can't. That's a rare ability, and it's powerful. Karevik knows that. But power means nothing without heart, and you've got more heart than you realize. Zaira blinked back tears. No one had ever said something like that before. A distant, metallic clang echoed through the tunnel. Daniel's face hardened. He helped her to her feet. They're tracking us again. We need to move. Zaira followed, her senses sharpening. The faint tremble beneath the ground felt wrong, like something massive moving far above. She glanced back, half expecting red glowing eyes to appear in the shadows. The tunnel ended at a rusted metal door. Daniel examined it and found a control panel. Old Earth tech, he muttered. Should still work. He connected a small device to the panel. A moment later, gears groaned, and the door slid open with a screech. They stepped through, and Daniel closed the door behind them. The air was different here, thinner, colder. Zaira looked around. They stood on a cracked concrete platform surrounded by the remains of an ancient metro station. The walls were scorched, the tracks twisted and broken. Old human signs hung at odd angles. Daniel exhaled slowly. Haven't been here since the war. You fought here? Zaira asked. He nodded. Yeah. Earth Alliance and local colonies tried to stop the Syndicate from taking the city. We lost. His eyes swept the station. Thousands died here. Good people. Zaira's glowing eye caught something strange. In the floor beneath the tracks, faint lines of energy pulsed slowly like a sleeping heartbeat. There's something under us, she said. Daniel followed her gaze. Energy conduit. Maybe an old generator. He knelt and placed a scanner on the ground. The screen showed faint signatures. We might be able to use that later. A faint hiss sounded from the opposite end of the platform. Daniel raised his rifle. Zaira instinctively stepped behind him. From the shadows emerged a sleek, black drone. It hovered a meter off the ground, a single red eye glowing in its center. The drone tilted slightly, scanning the area. Daniel fired. The energy bolt struck the drone's eye, and it shattered with a crackling explosion. The wreckage fell to the ground. Recon drone, Daniel said. They know we're here. A low, mechanical growl reverberated through the station. Run, Daniel ordered. Zaira sprinted with him across the platform. They climbed a crumbling staircase to the surface. Daniel blasted open a rusted door, and they burst into the open air. Zaira stumbled to a halt, her breath catching in her throat. The city was gone. They stood on the edge of the wastelands, an endless desert of blackened rock and twisted metal. The skeletons of skyscrapers leaned like broken bones against the sky. The air tasted of ash and rust. This was my home, Zaira whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. War leaves nothing untouched. The ground shook again, harder this time. A deep, rhythmic thudding approached from the distance. Daniel raised his binoculars. His body went rigid. Mech walkers. 3 of them. Zaira squinted. Her eye revealed the energy cores glowing like small suns in the distance, getting closer. Those machines are huge, she said. Siege-class walkers, Daniel said. Heavily armored. We'll never outrun them on foot. Zaira's heart pounded. What do we do? Daniel scanned the wasteland. We find transport. There's an old human outpost somewhere near the ridge. He pointed to the horizon, where jagged rocks rose like broken teeth. We get there, we might find what we need. The ground shook harder. Dust rose in the distance as the mechs advanced. Come on, Daniel said. They ran across cracked ground, dodging rusted metal beams and jagged rubble. Zaira's twisted legs slowed her down, but she didn't complain. Daniel moved slower too, his injured leg dragging slightly. A sharp whistling sound split the air. Incoming, Daniel shouted. Zaira dove behind a concrete slab as an explosion erupted nearby. Shards of metal flew past her. She looked up and saw one of the mechs cresting a nearby hill. Its cylindrical torso rotated, aiming massive cannons in their direction. Daniel fired his rifle, but the bolts fizzled harmlessly against the mech's armor. "We can't fight that," he said through gritted teeth. "We need cover." Zyra's glowing eye scanned the landscape. The energy lines showed something faint beneath the ground to the left. An underground passage. "There," she pointed. They sprinted toward a half-buried metal hatch. Daniel yanked it open. Zyra jumped in, landing on cold steel steps. Daniel followed, slamming the hatch shut just as another explosion shook the ground above. They sat in darkness, breathing hard. "Good call," Daniel said. Zyra nodded. "I just saw it." Daniel gave her a faint smile. "That eye of yours saved us again." The dim glow of her eye lit the corridor. Daniel checked his scanner. "Looks like this tunnel leads straight to the outpost," he said. "We follow it. And maybe we get there before Karevik does." Zyra swallowed hard. "And if we don't?" Daniel's face darkened. "Then the galaxy loses more than just a city." Zyra clenched her fists. For so long, she'd wished her glowing eye would disappear, but now it was their only hope. Somewhere above, the mech walkers moved away, searching for them. And beyond the wastelands, Karevik was waiting, the forgotten human outpost. The underground passage stretched before them, cold and silent. The walls were lined with rusted pipes, some cracked and leaking faint streams of vapor. Ira's glowing eye cast a soft silver light, revealing hidden lines of energy running beneath the surface. She walked beside Daniel, her small footsteps echoing softly in the narrow corridor. Daniel limped slightly, favoring his injured leg, but his grip on his rifle was firm. His eyes, sharp and alert, scanned every shadow. "How much farther?" Zyra asked softly. Daniel checked his wrist scanner. 2 kilometers, he said. "If we keep moving, we'll reach the outpost before dawn." Zyra nodded but said nothing. Her mind was full of unanswered questions. Why was her eye so important? What kind of weapon was Karevik looking for? And why had Daniel, a human soldier, risked so much to help her? The memory of Daniel's words echoed in her mind. Humans don't leave people behind. She wanted to believe that, but trust was hard when most of her life had been spent hiding from cruelty. The floor vibrated beneath their feet. Zyra stopped. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Daniel raised his rifle and crouched low. "Yeah, something big." The vibration grew stronger. The metal pipes along the walls rattled. In the distance, a low growl rumbled through the tunnel. Zyra's glowing eye flickered. Energy signatures, coming fast. From behind, Daniel's jaw tightened. Drones. Karavik's hunters. Without another word, they sprinted forward. The tremors grew sharper, and soon the echo of mechanical legs clanging against the tunnel floor filled the air. Zyra risked a glance back. Her glowing eye revealed 3 spider-like machines racing after them, each with spindly legs and glowing red eyes. Razor-sharp limbs scraped the walls as they closed the distance. "They're fast." Zyra gasped. Daniel skidded to a stop near a side passage and fired his rifle down the corridor. The energy blast struck the lead drone, shattering its eye and sending it crashing to the ground. "Go, go," Daniel ordered. Zyra dashed ahead, heart pounding. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to squeeze through a tight gap. Daniel followed, pausing just long enough to throw a small metallic sphere behind them. "What's that?" Zyra asked as they ran. "Surprise," Daniel said. Seconds later, a deafening blast shook the tunnel. The walls trembled as dust and debris collapsed behind them, sealing off the drones. They ran until their legs burned. Finally, they reached a metal ladder leading up. Daniel slung his rifle across his back and gestured for Zyra to climb. She hesitated. "What if there's more up there?" "We can't stay here," Daniel said. "Trust me." Zyra nodded and climbed. When she reached the top, she pushed against a heavy hatch. It resisted at first, but then creaked open with a loud groan. Cold night air hit her face. She climbed out onto cracked, rocky ground. Daniel followed and immediately shut the hatch behind them. The west lens stretched out in every direction. The ground was black and scarred from ancient battles. Twisted remains of war machines lay scattered like giant bones. The night sky above was filled with unfamiliar stars. "Where's the outpost?" Zaira asked, hugging herself against the cold. Daniel pointed toward a rocky ridge. "There, just beyond that hill." They moved quickly across the uneven ground. The silence was eerie, broken only by the occasional metallic creak from the wreckage around them. Zaira's glowing eye revealed faint energy traces beneath the surface. Old power conduits, long dormant. When they crested the ridge, Zaira gasped. Below them stood a massive circular structure partially buried in the ground. It was covered in dust and cracks, but the human insignia, a white star within a red circle, was still visible on the walls. "The old Earth Alliance Command Center," Daniel said. "Last line of defense during the war." "Why didn't it work?" Zaira asked. Daniel's face darkened. The Syndicate was too many, too fast. The Alliance didn't have the technology to fight them back then. His eyes shifted to her glowing eye. "But now, we have you." They descended into the outpost. The entrance was sealed by a thick blast door. Daniel used his wrist device to hack the control panel, but the system was dead. "Can you see any energy flow?" he asked. Zaira stepped closer and focused. The world shifted through her glowing eye. Faint streams of energy pulsed behind the wall, leading downward. "There," she said, pointing to a small panel to the right. Daniel opened the panel and found a manual override. He twisted a rusted lever, and the blast door groaned open. Inside, the outpost smelled of rust and old, stale air. Metal catwalks crisscrossed the large chamber. Giant screens, now dark and cracked, lined the walls. Daniel found a power terminal near the center. "The core should still be here. If we can restart it, we might send a distress signal." Zaira's eye caught the faint hum of dormant energy lines leading into the floor. "It's still there," she said. "The core, it's sleeping." "Can you guide me to it?" Daniel asked. She nodded. They moved toward a metal staircase. As they descended into the lower levels, the hum grew louder. In the core chamber, a massive cylindrical device sat in the center. The surface was covered in frost, and the control panel was dark. Daniel placed his hands on the console. "This core powered the planetary defense network once," he said. "If we can get it online, we might disrupt Karavik's forces, but we need your eye to find the activation pattern." Zaira stepped closer. Energy patterns shifted in her vision. Faint streams connected like veins, leading to 6 separate power nodes. "There are 6 connectors," she said. 3 are broken. The others are tangled. Daniel knelt beside the panel. "Tell me where to reroute the power." Zaira focused, directing him through each adjustment. With every shift of the levers, the core hummed louder. Suddenly, the core flared with blue light. The screens overhead blinked on, showing static and fragments of old battle data. "We did it," Daniel said. A harsh crackle came from the speakers. Emergency beacon activated. An automated voice said, "Alliance distress signal transmitted." Daniel smiled. "Now we wait for help." Zaira's eye caught something on the screen, an energy signature moving toward them. "Daniel," she whispered, "we're not alone." The camera feed shifted. A large figure stepped into view, flanked by black armored soldiers. The figure wore heavy battle armor with a helmet shaped like a skull. The speakers crackled again, and a cold voice filled the chamber. "Hello, little one," said Karavik. "Thank you for turning on the core. Now, I don't have to search anymore." Zaira's blood turned cold. "The human heroes stand." The voice crackled through the speakers, cold and sharp like ice against skin. "Hello, little one. Thank you for turning on the core." Zyra's heart froze. The glowing blue core behind her hummed softly, casting eerie shadows across the metal walls. Daniel gripped his rifle, his jaw tight. "Karivik," Daniel said, his voice low. "He's here." The screen flickered, revealing a close-up of the armored figure. The helmet resembled a skull, its eye sockets glowing red. Karivik tilted his head, as if examining them through the camera. "Daniel Reeves," the voice continued. "The stubborn human soldier. I thought you died when we burned your colony." Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. "You should have checked the ashes," he said through gritted teeth. Karivik's laugh was hollow. "And the girl? Zyra, isn't it? I know who you are. Your glowing eye is special. It can guide me to the power I seek. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be painless." Zyra pressed against the core, her glowing eye wide with fear. Daniel stepped in front of her. "Not happening," he said. Karivik's tone darkened. "Then you die with her." The screen went black. The hum of the core suddenly spiked. Warning lights flashed on the walls. "They're jamming the distress signal," Daniel said. He tapped the control panel. "They're trying to overload the core. If it explodes, it'll destroy the entire outpost." "Can we stop it?" Zyra asked, voice trembling. Daniel shook his head. "No, not from here. The core has a manual override in the central chamber, but it's open ground. No cover." The ground trembled. From above came the heavy clang of boots on metal. "They're here," Daniel said. Zyra's glowing eye caught the energy patterns of dozens of soldiers moving through the upper levels. Her heart pounded. Daniel crouched beside her. "Listen to me, Zyra. I need you to go through that maintenance tunnel." He pointed to a narrow shaft along the wall. "Follow it until you reach the surface. Stay hidden." "But what about you?" she asked. "I'll hold them off." "No." Zyra clutched his arm. "They'll kill you." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe. But if I don't stop them here, no one out there will be safe. You're the key, kid. Your eye can find that weapon before Karivik does. You can stop him." Tears blurred her vision. "I can't. I'm scared." Daniel squeezed her shoulder. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. It means you understand the danger, but you fight anyway." He hesitated. "I lost my daughter in the war, Zyra. She was about your age. I promised myself if I ever had the chance to protect another child, I'd do it, no matter what." Zyra's lip quivered. "You're not leaving me behind." "Never." Daniel placed a small device in her hand. "This is a signal beacon. When you get outside, turn it on. The Alliance might still pick it up." Zyra clutched the beacon tightly. "Okay," she whispered. "Go. Now." Reluctantly, she crawled into the maintenance tunnel. The last thing she saw before the hatch closed was Daniel turning to face the door, rifle raised. The upper blast doors exploded inward with a deafening roar. Smoke and sparks filled the chamber as Syndicate soldiers poured in. Their black armor gleamed under the core's blue glow. Daniel opened fire. His shots were precise, hitting the first wave in their visors. The soldiers fell, but more flooded in to take their place. He ducked behind a console, energy bolts scorching the metal around him. From the smoke stepped a massive figure, Karivik. The Syndicate leader stood still as the soldiers spread out. His crimson eyes locked on Daniel. "You humans are so predictable," Karivik said, "always fighting impossible battles." Daniel fired. The blast hit Karivik's chest. The armor sparked, but Karivik didn't flinch. "Energy dispersing plating," Karivik said. "You can't hurt me with that toy." Daniel gritted his teeth. His rifle beeped, almost out of charge. He shifted position, firing at the exposed ceiling supports. Metal beams groaned and collapsed, crushing several Syndicate soldiers. Karivik merely laughed. Desperation. How? Human. Daniel lunged toward the core's manual override. Karivik raised his arm. A whip-like energy lash shot out, wrapping around Daniel's leg. The jolt sent agony through his body, dropping him to the ground. "You lose," Karevik said, stepping closer. "Your world dies. Your sacrifice means nothing." Daniel spat blood and glared up at him. "You don't know humans very well," he gasped. With his last strength, Daniel threw a plasma grenade at the core's power conduit. The explosion sent a shockwave through the chamber. Sparks rained down as the core began to pulse erratically. Karevik staggered back, cursing. Tyra reached the surface, gasping for air. The beacon trembled in her hand. She activated it and hid behind a pile of rubble. Below, the outpost crackled with blue energy. Then the ground shook violently. A column of light shot skyward as the core detonated. The shockwave flattened nearby structures. Tyra's heart shattered. Daniel. Tears streamed down her face. The man who had protected her was gone. A low hum filled the air. She looked up and saw Karavik's warship descending through the smoke. The syndicate wasn't finished. Hazira clenched the beacon. Daniel had believed in her. Now it was her turn to fight. She turned toward the wasteland horizon, the glow of the warship behind her. Somewhere out there was the weapon Karavik wanted. And she would find it first. The final battle. The wastelands stretched endlessly before Xyra, the cold wind cutting through her thin clothing. Her glowing eye, dim with exhaustion, scanned the dark horizon. Energy lines shimmered beneath the ground, ancient veins of power from a war long lost. But she didn't care about old wars. Her heart ached for Daniel. The explosion still echoed in her mind, the blinding blue light, the ground trembling beneath her feet, the sickening realization that Daniel was gone. The man who had protected her, believed in her, and given her hope was now just a memory. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to move. The small signal beacon Daniel had given her blinked softly in her hand. She didn't know if the Earth Alliance had received the distress call. Behind her, the Syndicate warship hovered like a dark predator, its engines humming softly as it scanned the ruined outpost below. "They're still looking for me," she realized. Zara ducked behind a rusted beam. Her twisted leg throbbed with pain, but she didn't stop. Daniel had fought until the end to protect her. She couldn't give up now. The ground trembled again, softer this time. Kazira's glowing eye caught faint energy lines pulsing from the west, leading to a distant hill. The lines glowed differently, with a steady rhythmic beat. Something is there, she thought. She limped toward the hill, following the hidden energy veins beneath the ground. The hill wasn't just a hill. At the top, she found a massive metal hatch half buried in sand. Her eye revealed complex energy circuits beneath the surface. This wasn't ordinary machinery. It pulsed like a heart, alive and waiting. Zara knelt beside the hatch and traced the patterns with her fingers. Her glowing eye showed her where the circuits connected. She pressed a small circular plate. The hatch shuddered, then slowly opened with a groaning hiss. Beneath it lay a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Zara hesitated. Every instinct told her not to go down. But Daniel's voice echoed in her memory. "You're stronger than you think." She took a deep breath and started down the stairs. The underground chamber was enormous. Massive cables snaked across the floor, connecting to a circular platform in the center. Suspended above the platform was a metallic sphere, larger than a hover tank. The surface was covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with faint blue light. Zaira's eye revealed the truth. The energy was gathering. The weapon Karavik wanted wasn't just some ancient cannon or missile. It was something more, something alive with energy. She stepped closer. A control console sat nearby, blinking softly. The interface was unfamiliar, but energy lines ran from the console to the sphere. She placed her hand on the screen. The room responded instantly. The sphere began to rotate. Segments shifted, revealing a core of pure swirling energy. A voice crackled from hidden speakers. "Core activation requires biometric key. Identify." Zara froze. I don't know how. The voice remained silent. Then a soft vibration rippled through the floor. The warship above had landed. Zyra's mind raced. Karevik was coming. She had minutes, maybe seconds, before he reached the chamber. She studied the console. Her glowing eye revealed hidden pathways in the system. A secondary power line ran beneath the platform toward what looked like a manual override. She followed it. Near the back of the chamber, she found a second control panel protected by a thick glass cover. The panel pulsed faintly. It's connected to the core. The glass had a handprint scanner. Zyra hesitated, then placed her hand against it. The glass flickered, and the scanner beeped. Biometric anomaly detected. Adjusting parameters. Identification. Zyra of the Erythra species. Eye anomaly registered. Energy perception capability confirmed. Access granted. The sphere overhead began to glow brighter. The walls trembled as power surged through the ancient machinery. Zyra's glowing eyes saw it. The core wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a disruptor. A tool that could disable any energy-based technology within a massive radius. It could stop Karavik's war machines. The sound of footsteps echoed from the staircase. Zyra turned and saw Karavik descend into the chamber. He was taller than she had realized, his black armor gleaming under the core's glow. His red eyes locked onto her. "You did well, little one," Karavik said. His voice was almost pleased. "You led me straight to the core." Zyra backed away, but the warlord raised his hand. Energy tendrils lashed out like whips and coiled around her arms and legs. Pain surged through her body, and she collapsed. Karavik approached the console. He placed his gauntleted hand on the interface. "With this core," he said, voice thick with triumph, "I will bring every human world to its knees. And you, child, made it possible." Zyra gritted her teeth. She remembered Daniel's words. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. It means you fight anyway." Through the haze of pain, she saw the secondary panel nearby, the manual override. The energy lines connecting the panel pulsed like veins of lightning. Zyra focused through the agony and reached with her glowing eye. She followed the energy paths, searching for the command that Daniel once mentioned. Manual overload. There it was. She stretched out a trembling hand and pressed the glowing command button. The core roared to life. The sphere crackled with energy. The air vibrated. Karavik's eyes narrowed as the machine responded. "What did you do?" he growled. Zyra forced herself to sit up. "Stopped you," she said. The core unleashed a pulse of blinding energy. Karavik staggered backward, screaming as the pulse surged through his armor. The red glow of his eyes flickered and died. The energy whips around Zyra vanished. Karavik collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from his body. The warlord tried to stand, but his systems were dead. His soldiers above ground, every drone and warship powered by the same technology, were now disabled. The core hummed as the pulse faded. Zyra crawled away from the smoking warlord and slumped against the wall. Her body was weak. Her eye ached. But she had done it. The ground above trembled. A deep, familiar rumble filled the chamber. Engines. She staggered to her feet and limped to the surface. The sky was no longer empty. Sleek, gray ships descended from the clouds, their hulls marked with the Earth Alliance insignia. Zyra's beacon had worked. The Alliance soldiers poured from the transports, quickly securing the disabled Syndicate forces. One officer approached her, lowering his rifle when he saw her condition. "You activated the distress beacon?" he asked. Zyra nodded. The officer's gaze softened. "You did good, kid." Zyra's vision blurred. The exhaustion, the pain, the loss of Daniel, all of it crashed down on her. She swayed. The officer caught her. "Easy. We've got you." As she was helped onto a medical transport, Zyra looked back one last time. The wastelands were quiet now, and Karavik was defeated. But she felt no joy, only the hollow ache of missing the man who had believed in her. A new dawn, The hum of the medical transport was soft and steady, like a distant heartbeat. Kyra lay on a padded stretcher, her body wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her glowing eye, once bright and sharp, was dim now, flickering softly like a candle in the wind. Her mind drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. His voice echoed in her memory. "You're stronger than you think. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. Humans don't leave people behind." Tears trickled down her cheek. Daniel hadn't left her behind. He had stayed, fought, and sacrificed himself to protect her. And now she was here, alive. While he was gone, a hand gently touched her arm. She opened her eyes. A human officer in a gray uniform stood beside her. His face was lined with age and worry, but his eyes were kind. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Safe." Thyra whispered. "Daniel's gone. Karevik wanted me dead. No one's safe." The officer's gaze softened. "Karevik is in custody. His forces are disabled across the planet. The core you activated sent a disruption pulse through every syndicate system within 1,000 kilometers. You saved this world, Xira. Maybe even more." Zyra turned her face away. "I didn't save Daniel." The officer sighed and placed something in her hand. It was Daniel's wrist device, cracked but still intact. The screen displayed a single message. "For Xira, never give up." Fresh tears filled her eyes. The transport landed at a large base on the outskirts of the wasteland. The sky here was clear, pale blue with streaks of white clouds. The base was busy. Soldiers in gray uniforms moved in organized patterns, repairing damaged equipment, tending to the wounded, and preparing for the next step. Zyra was taken to the medical wing. Doctors scanned her, checking her twisted leg and her glowing eye. The lead doctor shook his head. Her eye's energy receptor is damaged. The overload pulse strained its core. It may go completely dark soon. Zahara didn't care. The eye had always brought her pain. Now it had cost her Daniel. When the doctors left, she sat alone in the sterile room, staring at the wrist device. Suddenly, it buzzed softly. The screen flickered. Zahara sat up. The device showed static for a moment. Then a voice crackled through the speaker. "Zyra." Her breath caught in her throat. "Daniel?" The voice was faint, weak. "Yeah, kid, it's me." Tears blurred her vision. "But you died." "The explosion. I saw it." "Almost," Daniel said. His voice was strained, as if every word hurt. "Core explosion knocked me out. Alliance found me under the debris. I'm in pretty bad shape, but I'm still here." Zyra clutched the device. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." "I didn't," Daniel whispered. "Never will." Relief and disbelief crashed over her. He was alive. Hours later, Zyra was allowed to visit Daniel in the intensive care unit. His body was wrapped in medical bands, his leg in a metallic brace. His face was pale, but his eyes still held that familiar warmth. Zyra stood beside the bed, unsure what to say. "You okay, kid?" Daniel asked, voice raspy. She wiped her eyes. "You almost died because of me." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No, Zyra. I lived because of you. If you hadn't activated that core, Karevik would have won." She sat down beside him. "My eye. The doctor said it might go dark soon." Daniel smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter. You see more than most people ever will. You see courage when you're scared. You see hope when others give up." Zyra's chest tightened. "I was so scared." "I know," Daniel said. "Being scared means you understand the risk. Fighting anyway, that's what makes you brave." They sat in silence for a while. Then Daniel asked, "Did the Alliance secure Karevik?" Zyra nodded. "He's in custody." "But," she hesitated. "He said something before he tried to take the core. He said he wanted to use my eye to find the catalyst." Daniel's face darkened. "The catalyst. You know what it is." Daniel exhaled slowly. There are legends about an ancient energy source, far older than human or syndicate technology. The catalyst can supposedly bend energy across vast distances, powerful enough to move planets or destroy fleets. Zyra shivered. That's what Karavik wanted. Daniel nodded. And if he mentioned it, then he might have others still searching for it. Days passed. Zyra helped the Alliance officers analyze the data from the core chamber. Her eye continued to dim, but her understanding of energy fields grew. She could interpret complex readings faster than the Alliance scientists. Meanwhile, Karavik was interrogated in a secure facility. He refused to cooperate, until one night, a guard found his cell empty. He had escaped. The news hit the base like a cold wave. Daniel, still recovering, met with Zyra in the command center. A holographic map displayed recent syndicate ship movements across nearby systems. Karavik won't stop, Daniel said. He'll go after the catalyst. And we have to stop him, Zyra said. Daniel gave her a proud smile. That's the spirit. But it'll be dangerous. We don't know where the catalyst is hidden. Zyra's glowing eye flickered as she stared at the map. The energy lines displayed in the holograph shifted, revealing faint, familiar patterns. There, she pointed. Daniel leaned forward. What are you seeing? My eye. It's recognizing the energy signature. She tapped a star system marked Tyrant Expanse. The patterns are similar to the ones I saw beneath the core chamber. Daniel straightened. That might be the catalyst. Then we go, Zyra said. Daniel chuckled softly. You're ready for another adventure already. Zyra gave a small, determined smile. You said humans don't leave people behind. Karavik won't stop. We have to stop him first. Daniel ruffled her hair. You sound like a soldier. Maybe I am, she said. Daniel nodded. All right then. Let's get ready. We have a warlord to catch. The next day, an Alliance reconnaissance ship lifted off from the base. Zyra sat beside Daniel in the cockpit, her glowing eye dimmer than before, but still flickering with resolve. Ahead of them, the Tyrant Expanse glimmered like a distant storm. Somewhere beyond those stars, Karavik was searching for unimaginable power. But Zyra and Daniel were coming for him. Together,